Welcome to the Rack Show, where we talk about everything regarding the responsibly armed citizen. My name is Tim Kelly. I'm here with Frank Horvath, and today we're going to be talking about parenting and guns, or kids and guns. So, how you doing, Frank?
Doing fantastic. Have a little bit of a cold, so a little under weather, but aside from that, I am faring just well.
As long as you're not sneezing or coughing into the microphone, we're good.
No promises, but we'll do what we can.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So parenting and guns. I'm a father. I've got a 3-year-old son. He's soon to be 4, and I've got a 6-year-old daughter. And for as long as I can remember, they have known about firearms. Literally, the day my daughter was born, I introduced her to all the firearms and that I had in the house. I mean, it's just kind of a big part of our life, you
Right.
know. So I tell our students all the time that our lifestyle around firearms is much different than most, right? So I don't expect that of other people, but you can't hide. I mean, from what we do, you can't hide firearms from our kids. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Well,
So.
and as a responsible parent, I don't think that you necessarily have to hide it, right?
Sure.
That's where that teaching, that education comes through, regardless of your firearm instructor or not.
Right.
And I think we'll talk about that a little bit later. But there are things that a responsibly armed citizen, if there are children in any way, shape, or form going to be anywhere near you, whether it be on your person, whether it be in your home, in a vehicle, wherever it is. I think we'll talk about that. But there's a responsibility. There's certain things you have to do, and there's certain ways that you have to go about doing things. I'm not saying that it's all going to be uniform. The way that you teach your children may be different than the way that I'm teaching my children. But the end goal and the reasoning behind that is what? Educating our children, educating them about firearm safety, and teaching them about a tool just like you would for anything.
Right. So why? Why in the first place? Why should we be teaching our kids about firearms? I can remember way back when. Well, it wasn't taught in my school, but years ago, before I started attending school, it was a very common thing to see firearms education or firearms safety classes and stuff like that in schools. Like it was not something that was so taboo like it is today. It was something that was taught actively in homes and in schools. So why should we get back to that? Why should we even consider teaching our kids about guns?
It has everything to do with safety. It has everything to do with it is in order to be a responsible armed citizen, you have to be responsible, right? There's things that you must do, and I think educating your children, educating others to help teach their children. I think that's our responsibility as a better armed community, better armed society. Because let's face it, your kids are going to be exposed to a firearm at some point in their lives. And that's the unfortunate. There are not responsible people. There are people who are ill prepared, ill ready to live this responsible armed citizen lifestyle, and they'll do something silly like leaving a firearm in a public restroom.
Yeah.
Right on the back of a toilet. If a child goes over to, we'll say, a grandparent's home, right? If the grandparent, who normally doesn't have children at home, leaves a firearm out on a nightstand or something like that, because that's what they normally do, they didn't have the presence of mind of putting that up or whatever it may have been, then now that child is exposed to a firearm. Now, that's illegal. I mean, we'll just go ahead and nip that in the butt. Like, we're not saying that. There's the Storage Protect Minors Act, right? There are
Sure.
things legally, but regardless of that, the child is still being exposed to a firearm. It's still being exposed to a tool.
Right.
So it's our responsibility as parents. It's our responsibility to be able to control that situation of when they're going to be exposed and how and help instill the ideas, help instill the ways that our children are going to react around that.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I mean that exposure can come in a lot of different ways. I mean, you've got video games, you've got movies, and that type of thing as well. It may not just be stumbling upon a firearm in a house,
right.
but it really starts to build that curiosity in the child, and like you said, if they go over to to their friend's house and little Bobby knows where Dad keeps his revolver, and he's like, "Hey man, come and show let me show you this." And it's your kid's first time ever seeing a gun. We don't want that to be their first experience. So I want to make sure we take note. This isn't just for the responsibly armed citizen. This is for a parent,
Right.
just a parent.
Right.
It does not matter if you like guns.
Right.
It does not matter. If you do not like guns, that's perfectly fine. Let's say you don't want them in your house. You don't want guns around anywhere, right? You don't believe in them, and that's perfectly fine. It is your right as an American citizen. But to fear them and completely keep from teaching your kids about them is irresponsible.
Right.
It is absolutely irresponsible. And it can lead to a serious catastrophe. That's kind of like, my mother, bless her heart, she was afraid of big water, like any kind of pools. She couldn't swim, right? She was afraid to get into a lake or anything like that, to a pond and go swimming. And, because of that, now I can swim. I swim like a fish now. But because of that, I was afraid of water for a long time. And it kept me from getting into it. Now, I kind of see that as a bad thing, because had I ever found myself in water and I didn't want to be, I wouldn't know what to do. And that's kind of how I see how I see teaching kids about firearms. If we're not teaching them, proper safety and handling and that type of thing, if we're not teaching them, they're going to try and figure it out on their own. Luckily, my mother recognized that I was also afraid of big water, so she signed me up for swimming classes, and so that helped me out a lot. That's the reason why I can swim today. But there's still, in the back of my head, there's still this little faint, like, no, I don't want to get in there. There's sharks in there. Well, it's a pool, Tim. No, there's sharks in there.
Well, so, something else to also consider is, it doesn't necessarily have to be about, safe handling or, safety, with the actual physical firearm. It could just be, hey, these are a set of rules in our house that you're going to follow if you see a firearm, right? So
Right.
for many, especially, I understand the point of view. I don't agree, but I understand the point of view of being afraid of a firearm.
Right.
So if, at the bare minimum, you should help and you should instill into your kids, or at least have rules set up in the home to where if you see this, then you do this. Like if you see a firearm, do not touch it. Right? Go get an adult. Go get a responsible person so that we can go ahead and talk. Figure that out. So yeah, so we've talked about a little bit about why you should teach kids. The really common question we get all the time is what age, right? When do I start teaching my kid about firearms safety, about being exposed to firearms, things of that nature? And I think that's an interesting point. So it's definitely something that we should dive into a little bit and talk a little bit more about, and maybe even some common misunderstandings, right?
Yeah.
Some common things about kids and guns. So let's cut the break and we'll be right back. We are back to the RAC Show, the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show. I'm one of your hosts, Frank Horvath. Joined with me in studio is Tim Kelly, and we are talking about kids and guns. More specifically, at what age do we start, teaching kids about firearms, and what are some of the common misunderstandings about kids and guns? So, Tim, what do you think? What's your opinion? When do you start teaching a kid about firearms?
Well, like most things in our teachings, it depends. It really depends on you, the parent, your level of education on the subject, your honest level of education on the subject, and I think that's really what's going to dictate what age you actually start educating your kids about firearms. If you're like the ones in the last segment we were talking about, some parents are afraid of firearms, right? I wouldn't necessarily agree that person who is afraid of firearms and doesn't know anything about them, they're probably not the best person suited to teach their kids about firearms, right? So they shouldn't just go out and try to teach them, hey, this is this and this is that. Well, we don't necessarily want to teach them that way. We want to make sure that we actually know what we're talking about, so that we can teach them the correct way.
Yeah, they need a foundation.
Right, absolutely. So I would say, depending on your level of education, so if you've got some type of experience in firearms handling and training, at the bare minimum, have taken some type of basic firearms class, a pistol class or a rifle class or something along those lines.
Basic safety.
Yeah, just a firearm safety class, and those are available all over the place. I mean, there's plenty of organizations out there that exist that have different classes like that. Like the NRA certainly has some classes. USCCA has some basic firearms safety classes.
Yeah, I know a lot of communities, like their police and sheriff's departments. I think Iredell County, I'm pretty sure they offer some like community safety, basic firearm safety courses also. But
right.
It's just local municipalities will often have some sort of course or something like that they can take if you don't want to go seek out a company, a class.
Right. So, and it also depends on your kid's age too, in terms of how deep you really get into teaching them about firearms. I mean, if the kid can't communicate effectively, right? Like if they can't say the word gun and they can't say the word no or something like that, if they can't speak and communicate with you, you have to be careful about how you are. You have to be careful about how you are teaching your kids and how deep you actually go into that subject. Like I wasn't joking, but I was, telling you earlier about like the day Addie was born, I carried her into, the area where I keep all my guns, and I was showing her around and stuff. And I was really just trying to give my wife a break for a minute, and just showing her around the house and that type of thing. She's brand new, man. Just got her, right? Still got the new baby smell, right? And she doesn't remember any of that, right? And that's really not the point. It's more of a, like this is our lifestyle, kid. Like this is something that's that you're going to be seeing on a regular basis, for as long as you're alive, really, at least as long as you live in this house. So it was more of a familiarization for her. And then, as they got older and they started to, be able to talk and start to ask questions, like even the most very basic one, like, what's that? All right. That's when you start teaching them about it. Now, I don't expect them to know the nomenclature of a firearm when they're 3 years old, right? They can't remember and retain all of that information. That's not the point. The point is to get them to the point where they can communicate, okay, if I am curious about this, all I have to do is ask. Can I see that? Yes, you may. Can I touch that? Yes, you may. Don't touch the trigger. Don't touch the muzzle. And you remind that over and over and over and over, and by the time they're Addie's age, where she's 6 years old now, she knows. She knows not to touch the firearm unless she asks.
Now, point of clarity, that this firearm that you're allowing them to be curious about is not loaded.
Oh yeah,
I just want to make sure that's crystal clear.
That's a good point. Actually, we'll talk a little bit more. I think we're going to talk a little bit more later about
how,
like everyday carry troubles and stuff, about how to deal with that loaded firearm in a kid. But no, yeah, we're talking about stored firearms that are completely, safe and rendered inert. They're not capable of harming anybody, so it's completely unloaded. Yeah, those are the ones, and most of the time they just want to pet the wood stock or something like that, or feel the grooves on a hammer on a revolver or something like that.
They're curious, right? So they're inquisitive, especially if they're around, if they're seen, if you're concealed carrying something like that, and they see mom or daddy taking it and putting it in a secured place each and every day, then there's gonna be some curiosity there. They're gonna ask questions, and that's healthy. Right. Being able to encourage a lifestyle of asking questions and learning about things. I mean, it's healthy. It's healthy for a kid to do. That does nothing but sets them up for success a little bit later. Now, you talked a little bit about it depends on the kid. I can 100% relate to that. My son and daughter, very similarly, they've been around firearms their entire life. And we did it in stages, depending on, what their maturity level was, depending on what their, mental capacity was at, and what their actual understanding is. And here's the thing, like, my son just recently turned 4. My daughter's been 4 for a couple of years now, right? So she turned 4 a little while ago. But they're, the maturity level and the, where they're able to communicate, and how they're able to communicate, and how they're able to speak, and just where their thought process is vastly different.
Yeah.
Like my son, I feel like is way behind my daughter at the same age.
Yeah.
Versus, where, my daughter was way ahead of, most other kids that were her age, at the time. So I think that's a good example of it. It really depends. It depends. I'm not saying a 4-year-old is going to go out and to have a firearm and start doing things. That's not at all what I'm saying.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, taking and educating them, and just like you said, allowing them to, look at things, touch things, with proper safety precautions put in place, and in the presence of you as the parent is absolutely suggested, and I think it's beneficial, as long as, like you said, and as long as the parent has that fundamental understanding of what safety is, this fundamental administrative handling skills and things like that. Something else I want to touch on real quick is, my kids or my daughter really, she's 7 now, almost 7. She was not able to, shoot a gun, have anything to do with a firearm until she was able to, tell me, and this is just what we did in my house, until she was able to tell me what her, fundamental firearm safety rules were. And she was not only supposed to tell me, not just recite them blindly, but what each individual rule meant.
Right.
And for me in my house, that worked out very well. So, early on it was, if you see a firearm, don't touch, go get an adult. Right. And it's still that way. But when she got to the point of being able to tell me what her fundamental firearm safety rules were and why those rules were important, that's when I took her to the range. We were able to go pick out, it's my firearm, but I let her use it with me. A little, pink little 22, and we were able to go out and actually start shooting together, and we start, training together a little bit as far as, some of those foundational skills. The only reason I was able to do that is because she was interested. She was curious, and she was curious enough to put some forethought into some actual thought into remembering, okay, these are important rules for my life. So because they're so important, and because I want to do this, then I'm going to memorize, and then I'm going to be able to recite and tell you exactly why.
Right.
That was important for me in my house.
Right.
My son, not there yet.
Yeah.
Not even close. He's still little bam, like I want to, we did get him his first Nerf gun, this birthday. And, it was big stuff for us in our house. And, he's still shooting the ceiling and doing all kinds of fun stuff with it that, kids need to do. But it's, again, it's just, kids are different, right?
Yeah.
It depends on where they're at.
It really does, man. As far as, you said Max is not there yet. Neither is Kipley. Kipley's got like the two most important firearms handling safety rules down. You know, keep your finger straight and off the trigger until you're ready to fire, and keep the gun pointed in a safe direction. But he's got those down. But and we did things a little bit different. I exposed our kids, to firearms. They went to the range all the time, but we have a range right in front of our house.
Right.
Like, this is literally what I do for a living. So you can only get asked the question so many times, Papa, can I go to the range? Can I go see what you do? Can I go out there? Right. So we go out there, and they were able to see me shoot, or see some of the, somebody else shoot, but they weren't allowed to actually shoot firearms themselves until they could recite those firearms handling safety rules. Now, one of the cool things that we did, one of the cool things that we did was we got a small SIG P365 BB gun. And I took and I made them a belt, a little gun belt. I had a holster for an outside the waistband holster for the 365, and it's a BB gun. So I let them learn handling on that. Once they got to that point, mainly it's Addie. Addie uses it more than Kipley does right now, but she uses that. And if you keep the magazine out of it, right, and it's not loaded at all, you teach her how to verify that it's unloaded, and you teach her dry fire practice.
Yep.
And through that, she's able to make mistakes. She's able to make mistakes and break a rule, and it not be the end of the world.
Yeah, and you can correct her.
Right. And that's really where we want to. When we're easing our kids into handling firearms, it's one of the things you really want to make sure you're doing is using some type of inert firearm, right, so that they understand the importance. But they're allowed to make mistakes. They've got to. They've got to make mistakes. And I'd rather them make mistakes with a firearm that is completely incapable of hurting somebody, than later on in life when they said, I think I remember how to do this.
Right. We in our house, we liked using the orange, like dummy guns, the orange pistols, and then after the orange pistol and the blue pistols, they're just rubber pieces of molded rubber, right? And then you pick them on Amazon pretty cheap, and then we moved on to SIRT pistols and things like that. It was really interesting, trying to figure out different ways of being able to safely expose our kids to, again, just like you said, an inert something, right? Just to get the thought going. Let's keep talking a little bit about this. Cool.
Welcome back to the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show, the RAC Show. I am Tim Kelly, and I have Frank Horvath with me, and we are talking about kids and guns. We were kind of talking about what age we should start teaching our kids about firearms, and I really wanted to point something out. Man, you'd be surprised at the things that you'll find on the internet.
No, really?
But I was watching a Instagram reel the other day of this gentleman who was claiming that you don't need to worry about storing your firearms or keeping them away from your kids, so long as your kids know how to safely handle them. They know firearm safety. I think that's a pretty serious misunderstanding, and it can be taken, the wrong way. As we've already covered, our kids are different. They learn differently. They learn at different ages. There's just you can't blanket statement something like that.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about kids and guns, one of the first things we think of is a toddler and a firearm. We're not just talking about toddlers and firearms. We're talking about a kid, which is, from 0 to 18. And there's a lot of different considerations that you have to keep in mind there, right? For instance, if you live under that, if you live that mindset of, I don't have to worry about keeping my guns put away, my kids know better. Think back when you were a teenager going through puberty and you were dealing with all of these new hormones. Think back to what that was like for you. And imagine just how catastrophic it could be if there was a firearm available to you.
Absolutely.
Like all of the drama you deal with as a young teenager, breakups, schoolyard bullies or whatever, had I had a firearm, then had quick access to a firearm, that could have been really bad.
Right.
I could have made a lot of really bad decisions. There are many reasons that you should be keeping your guns, up and put away. And you can't rely on this. Well, they know better. They know they'll get the belt if they,
Right.
Or something along those lines. Man, you can't rely on that.
Yeah, I think that thought process is irresponsible.
Right.
Again, blanket statements. Every kid is different. I mean, there's. Are you willing to chance it?
Right.
I mean, are you willing to risk the safety of your child, the safety of potentially other people's children, or just other people in general? That's not something I'm going to risk.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. It takes one minor lapse in judgment, right, when you're in a low place, in order to change the lives of everyone else that's around you.
Right.
It doesn't have to even be a firearm, right? It could be a nail gun. It could
Yeah.
be a hammer. It could be a knife. It doesn't matter. But for those same reasons, we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing as responsibly armed citizens, and we're stowing those firearms when they're not being used. We're
Right.
stowing those firearms outside of the hands of the ready access of children. So EDC, right? So we are responsible armed citizens. We carry on us every single day.
Yeah.
Right? We have a firearm on our person. Our spouses often have firearms on their person or do on a regular basis. So at the end of the day, after you've done your thing, if you're taking your firearm off your person, whatever it is, what are some things to think about? What are some complications to that?
I think some of the biggest complications that I've noticed with having taking kids to the store and having a gun on me, especially when they're at that young age, the what's that? What's
Right,
that?
right.
They just repeat themselves over and over again. At that stage, it can be rather awkward, a little difficult to manage. You have to get creative.
Yep.
For instance, Kipley was the worst with it. Kipley would, he would, pick him up and like his knee would brush, the butt of my gun or something like that, and he'd be like, "What's that, Papa? You got your gun on you?" And then you're around a crowd of people, and it's like, yeah, it was my belt, Kipley. That was my belt buckle.
Right.
Where you try to hide stuff like that, and then you have to have that conversation with them when you get into a private place of we don't talk about guns when we're in public, and that's teaching them the purpose of concealment. right? The purpose of concealment is it stays put away. Nobody else needs to know that you have it on you. That is the whole point of concealment. He doesn't understand that.
Right.
You know, obviously they have no clue. But that is one of the complications. Now, one of the things that my wife ran into is Kipley would try to like raise her shirt up to look, and and you'd have to stop him, you know. And I can't tell you how many times we've had to have that talk with him of like, we don't talk about guns in public. We don't, and the other thing is just having conversations. It may not even be about like the gun that's on you. Just having conversations with people. When your kid goes up to an adult and talks to, and you have imagination like Kipley has, he's talking about shooting coyotes and stuff like that in his backyard, and I don't know, riding deer and stuff like that with his bow and arrow. Like he's got a serious imagination.
Absolute wild man.
Yeah, dude, he has serious imagination. But he'll go off on these rants about firearms with people he's never even met before.
Right.
And he'll try to teach him. He says he's got to teach him about firearms. So what he's teaching them is teaching about what a trigger is and stuff like that. And he's just a little educator, man. That can be awkward. That can be awkward with somebody you just met and they're like, this kid's talking to me about guns. Like, man, what's their? I'm imagining what they're imagining right now. Like this house is probably.
What's their home life look like? Like where they live in an arsenal? Like what is going on here?
Yeah, no kidding. So yeah, those conversations, man, it can make for some really weird conversations with people, and I think a lot of folks sometimes can get the wrong idea and think that just automatically assume that we are just irresponsibly leaving firearms laying around or something like that.
Right.
Or, we let our kids to run around with guns all day or something like that. And that's not the case at all. So I think there's a lot of misunderstandings there. Some other everyday carry struggles, I guess, is just, how do I manage dealing with two like raging little kids, at Costco, running around. I've got to pick one up. One fell over. Oh, I've got to pick her up and pat her on the back. And I got to do that without like them accidentally, lifting their shirt up or lifting my shirt up with their foot and exposing my firearm. It's like you're constantly adjusting yourself when you're picking the kids up, and it can be difficult. It can be difficult. But have you run into any troubles?
Yeah. So primarily, the way that I normally carry, it's bound to happen. The Max or Harper will come running up to me and they want to give me a great big hug or something like that, and their head is right, where my holster, my firearm is. So Max used to do it all the time. He's slowed down now.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he stopped, but he just run full bore, give me a great big hug, and bang, he bounces his head off of off the holster, and while funny, like you feel bad.
Yeah.
It's like, buddy, you okay? He's like, oh, what was that? I'm like, oh, well, that was my belt, buddy, or whatever it is. But thinking more about home life, right? So thinking about keeping that at the end of the day, we're done. I'm taking my firearm off my person, whatever it may be, just before bed or however that ends up working. Putting that firearm in a safe place, right? So, and thinking about what a safe place is and what actually works for you and your family. I've seen firsthand so many people who will just, they'll take their firearm off, they'll take it out of a purse, out of a bag, whatever it is, and then end up sticking it somewhere that instead of putting it, inside of a locked container or something like that. And man, kids are monkeys.
Yeah, man.
Kids will absolutely get a hold of that. They'll get it down. They don't have the presence of mind to really understand. Like, just throwing it on top of your fridge or on top of your dryer or on top of, a dresser or something like that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or just sticking it in a drawer, out of sight, out of mind. Yeah, until somebody opens it up and now it's in their mind.
Right.
So, really finding a place that that firearm can be secure, think again, weighing out, the competency of the kid and, figuring that out. We went to the homeschooling conference not long ago, and we had the what was it, the stop box?
The stop box,
Yep, so
yeah.
we had stop box there, and the dad walks up and goes, "Oh yeah, I got one of these," and the kid was like,
Yeah, you do.
yeah, you do," and the kid opened the stop box up like
Yeah.
immediately right in front of us, and what's the first thing he does as soon as he opens the box?
He picks it up.
He picks it up. We had a dummy gun inside
Yeah.
the stop box. He picks the dummy gun up, starts waving it around. You're like, "Sir, we are why you are why we are here. Like
Yeah.
we need to have a conversation because if the kid already knows how to defeat that retention device, because that's
Yeah.
what it is, the retention device, then it's not doing you any good in your home
Right.
at all.
Yeah, what I thought was interesting about that was when the kid did that and grabbed the gun, and the dad immediately started getting defensive. It was like, oh, well, he wouldn't do that with a real
Right.
gun. And like,
Right.
he's like, how did you do that? And he's talking to his son. How did you do that? And he's like, well, you showed me. He's like, no, I didn't. And then that look of concern you could see come over his face, and we're like, yeah, bro. He was
Kid's been playing.
He was doing that when you weren't around.
Right.
So I mean that's a problem. So you can't you can't expect certain, as you were saying, you can't expect certain obstacles like a retention device to work forever. You're going to have to upgrade to something a little bit more serious, like something that's got a biometric or a punch code or at least a key, something
Right.
that a kid just can't easily access. Yeah, man. One of the things I want to put out, what my life looks like on the daily. You wake up in the morning, gun goes on, go about my daily business, no matter what it is I'm doing, right? And then at night, put the gun away. It goes up in a locked box. That is what I do literally every single day. My kids see me with a gun on me. They know and expect that I'll have my gun on me
Right.
every single day. So for most families, a lot of our listeners are probably like, that's just weird. My kid's going to look at you and say, you're weird.
Right.
my kid automatically assumes, and there's a lot of times, one of the awkward moments is the kid saying, where's your gun? Like,
Right.
like feeling around your waistline is like, where's your gun?
Right.
Like,
It's because it's abnormal for them, right?
Yeah.
It's something that that's they're used to. Their parents being in a position to protect themselves and protect them. So
Right.
that's again all interesting things, all things to talk about. Competency this month is next. Let's do it.
Welcome back to the RAC Show. This is the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show, where we talk about everything regarding the responsibly armed citizen. My name is Tim Kelly, and with me I have Frank Horvath. We've been talking about kids and guns, parenting and guns, that type of thing. Man, we've hit on a lot of different things. One of the things that we like to do at the end of our show is talk about our competency of the month. The competency of the month is something that we originally created as an in-house way of keeping each other accountable and keeping education flowing throughout our cadre.
Right.
And so what we were doing is every month we would talk about and highlight a specific subject, and we'd discuss it. And so we've just been including it in our show now and discussing it in the show with other folks, and I think it's working out really well. So this is actually the last time we're going to be talking about this particular competency, safe storage of firearms, and then we'll move on to something else next month. But safe storage of firearms and how it relates to kids in the home. What do we got?
Well, we've already touched on base on it, right? So last segment we talked about the example of the kid defeating the retention device, right? And considering that. As far as safe storage of firearms, it really depends on the home. It depends on the maturity and education level of the kid. It depends on there's a lot of aspects, a lot of things to consider. So, for example, little kids, toddlers, things like that, a retention device may be enough, right? That may be just fine. But as they start getting older into those preteen, teenage years, then you really should start considering, or you really start to look at, an actual like safe or vault or something, or like some way of retaining that firearm to where they are not able to, somebody's not able to use it, or unauthorized person's not able to gain access to the firearm. But that poses a question, right? It poses something, and we'll play devil's advocate just a little bit, all right? Throw you a curveball. There are plenty of examples where a child, we'll say a teenager, was able to use a firearm in self-defense of himself or his family, or herself, and their family, right? And they had ready access to the firearm. They were able to use that firearm. I know that's an outlier, but Tim, what do you think about that? How would you handle that, or what do you think about somebody like that being able to gain access to a firearm and use it in defense of their home?
Man, that's a tricky one. That's a really tricky subject. I want to read something real quick, just so everybody's on the same page on the legal reasons why you need to keep your firearms stored.
Yep.
And so I am reading, let's see here, this is from the North Carolina General Assembly, S14-315. Any person who resides in the same premises as a minor owns or possesses a firearm and stores or leaves the firearm in a condition that the firearm can be discharged and in a manner that the person knew or should have known that an unsupervised minor would be able to gain access to the firearm is guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor if a minor gains access to the firearm without the lawful permission of the minor's parents or persons having charge of the minor and the minor. If they possess it in violation of that code, exhibits it in a public place in a careless or angry or threatening manner, causes personal injury or death with it and not in self-defense. That's what I really wanted to point out.
Not in self-defense.
Not in self-defense, or uses it in the commission of a crime. Nothing in this section shall prohibit a person from carrying a firearm or on his or her body or placed in such close proximity that it can be used as easily and quickly as if carried on the body. This section shall not apply if the minor obtained a firearm as a result of an unlawful entry by a person. Minor, as used in this section, means a person under 18 years of age who is not emancipated. Okay, so I'm trying to think of the different scenarios that could play out where a kid gets a hold of a firearm to protect themselves. I don't have children that are at that age yet. So it's hard for me to imagine it.
Right.
But possibly if something happened to the parent and the kid knows that the firearm is on the parent and the parent can no longer use it and the kid grabs it off of the parent and uses it, that is I think one of the more logical ways of the child gaining access to the firearm and then using it to defend themselves. Other than that, currently, right now, as my household sits, that they're not gaining access to any firearm. Like that's literally the only possible way, my children could gain access to one. So as they get older, one of the things that that kind of crosses my mind. We're not talking, and this is not just about self-defense, but what happens when Kipley is or Addie, decides, hey, I want to go duck hunting in the morning. I know you got to go to work, Dad, but I want to go duck hunt. Can I go duck hunt? When they get to be a specific age, how do I go about handling that? Like there are different considerations here. You have to be thinking about ahead of time of like how am I going to handle those situations, right?
Right.
Am I going to let my 16, 17-year-old son or daughter go out themselves, out to the pond or whatever and go duck hunting, or go out to the deer stand and go deer hunting with a rifle, am I going to turn them loose with a firearm? And like there are, and what provisions am I putting in place to make sure that they're okay doing that? Right? There's a lot of different considerations here, and I would say the one thing I wouldn't do is allow them to have access to both ammunition and a firearm, like they can just go and grab them and take them anytime they want. And I think that will be a rule in our house until they are 18 years old,
right?
Or older.
I mean, for me, man, it's a tough one, right?
Yeah.
Again, I'm like you. I don't have kids that are that old yet. So as of right now, it's not even a thought in our house. But the stories that scare me, or I don't want to say scare me. The stories that I'm reminded of about the possibility of something. Texas, 2013, 15-year-old kid, 12-year-old sister, 12-year-old daughter, sister, were left at home. Parents were at work or whatever it may have been. Armed intruders, multiple armed intruders, were attempting to break into this Texas house. So the 15-year-old knew where the father's firearm was, went and retrieved the firearm, and successfully used it against these intruders, right? If they were to get in and, there's a 12-year-old girl, a 15-year-old boy that's at home alone, I mean, I know that's an outlier, right? I'll admit that that's an outlier. But, that could have been so much worse. What if that was your kid? I mean, that's what I'm trying to weigh that against. Yeah. So, to be honest, I don't know. I don't know yet how we're going to handle that in my home, my family. That's something that, as we grow, we're going to learn a little bit more. But, understanding and studying the law, there are a number of cases across the states, right? There are a number of cases where an incident like that has opened up, has unrolled. Tim, just last night up in Pennsylvania, there was another big block citywide, or not block, but a neighborhood-wide gang violence, neighborhood-wide shooting. So there's people all over the place that were firing guns and things like that at each other. Again, gang related.
Sure.
That what if that was my family and they were involved in that? We were not involved with the gangs, but what if that was happening around us? I don't know. I don't know how to react to that.
Maybe there's a rule of thumb there. If they're of an age where they can be trusted to be left at home by themselves, maybe they do need to have access to something, to be able to protect themselves in the event somebody tries to break into the house or something like that, like in the instance you were talking about a minute ago.
But at the same time, where I'm like, I'll do that. There are other preventative measures we can put in place to help mitigate it even more so that doesn't require access to a firearm.
Yeah.
So it's catch-22. It's like you know, I want my kids to be able to defend themselves, but is the tool of a firearm the proper choice,
Right.
for them to defend for them to defend themselves?
Right.
That's what you got to weigh out. That's
Yeah.
what you got to figure out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. We're very cool. So, like I said, I knew I threw that curveball at you as far as kids having ready access to it. Tim, as far as kids gaining access to firearms, kids storage of firearms inside a home. What else do you think? Is there anything else out there? This will be the last one.
Man, just final thoughts. If you have kids, educate them about firearms to the best of your abilities, right? Get them education the best you possibly can. If you don't know enough about firearms, seek out somebody who does. We have taught kids, we have taught families, and that type of thing at our place at Apache. There's no shame in that. Go find out more information. Keep your guns locked up, right? As you said a while ago, put preventative measures in place in your home. Keep your house fortified, right? Win that battle before it even starts.
Right.
Those are the things that you need to be considering as a responsibly armed citizen, or even just as a parent. As a parent, you need to educate your kids and make sure that they know that guns should be locked up. There are all kinds of different ways you can lock up your guns. You can go back to previous episodes. We talked about different breech locks. We've talked about Harbor Freight,
Apache cases.
Apache cases. Yeah. We've talked about, the Vault-Tec USA stop box. There's all kinds of them out there. It's crazy, man. You just jump on Amazon. It's a 2-day delivery away. Just get it to your house and get it locked up. That's really the best answer there. So moving forward, we're going to be talking about next month, we're going to be talking about the competency of the month, functions of a cartridge or shell, and the phases of ballistics. That should be an interesting one.
Yeah, we're going to start getting a little technical.
Yeah,
I love
man.
it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
We'll see how that works out.
Awesome, man.
All right. Well, guys, that has been the Rack Show. We appreciate it. That's our show for the day. We will see you guys next week.